Today, I was thinking about how MicroStrategy investors may be some of the most hardcore Bitcoiners ever, and I wrote a tweet to explain my thoughts. So let's go to the tweet. I started it off with MicroStrategy is going to make America great again. I'm going to tie this in near the end, so just stick around till the end just so I can go through the whole thing. Uh, I'm going to explain my thoughts on this. So MicroStrategy investors may be some of the most hardcore Bitcoiners ever. Why? Stock prices are forward looking. So what I mean by this is that people aren't valuing MicroStrategy based on its current holdings or its the current value that it's producing. The people who are buying MicroStrategy are measuring MicroStrategy's value based on the future projections of what they think the world will look like. So let's say, for example, the people who are buying MicroStrategy think that Bitcoin will be money. They think that it'll be used as money. So what they're doing is they're buying a company that's borrowing money. They're borrowing fake money and they're selling equity in a financial system that's completely overvalued and massively, massively overvalued because the US dollar is a fake asset. It's fake money. So what they're doing is they're buying a company that's borrowing money. They're borrowing this fake money and it's buying Bitcoin. It's selling its equity. It's selling its stock. It's selling ownership in the company to buy more Bitcoin. And that's the ownership that these people are buying. So they're buying MicroStrategy ownership at a net asset value premium. So this is a number that a lot of people argue about. They're paying 3 times the value of the Bitcoin that MicroStrategy holds. But they don't see MicroStrategy as just the Bitcoin. They see MicroStrategy as where it's going in the future. So we can see here, MicroStrategy could be a direct competitor of, let's say, Visa or MasterCard. So what it's trying to do is it's accumulating as much of this capital, as much of this money as possible. No matter what happens, no other company in the world will catch up. I don't think that's possible at this point. No other company will be able to own as much Bitcoin as MicroStrategy has. No other company will be able to convert equity the same way that MicroStrategy is doing it. MicroStrategy has a moat. They have a clear competitive advantage. They've done the research. They understand how Bitcoin works. They've put in the time. They've used leverage to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. So what this will do is it'll give MicroStrategy the ability to be a payment processor or to be a Bitcoin bank, to make loans. Let's say, for example, if they want to make loans on a Bitcoin standard, maybe they'll charge 20% interest, 15% interest, because there's so much more risk to lending Bitcoin than there is to lending fiat. So the current banking system, they can lend money at, let's say, 5, 6%. They'll make money on that. They make tons of money. They're some of the most profitable businesses in the world. What MicroStrategy could do is, because MicroStrategy holds a ton of Bitcoin, it can use the law of numbers to its advantage. So it can lend Bitcoin, let's say 10% of its holdings to people, and over time, it keeps accumulating more and more value, more and more interest, more and more Bitcoin over time because it's lending the Bitcoin and it's getting paid back. Some of those loans, of course, are going to default. Nothing that MicroStrategy will be able to do for this. But the way that I see it, over time, MicroStrategy is going to figure out ways to lend to people, let's say, to lend to businesses based on certain ideas. Maybe it gets some equity in the company in order to lend money to this business. Maybe it could become the biggest venture capitalist in the world because it has all of this capital. This is massive. Most people don't see this. Most people don't see this at all. So we can see here. So to MicroStrategy investors, it's already clear that Bitcoin will be used to exchange, store, and account for value in the future. The people who are bearish on MicroStrategy and think it's a pyramid scheme are the same people who think Bitcoin is just another asset. So they can't see the world apart from being on a US dollar standard. So the only world that they've lived in, the only world they can imagine, is one where we continue to use the US dollar as money. So if you already think that Bitcoin is a scam, how are you going to invest in MicroStrategy when MicroStrategy is using leverage to buy Bitcoin? If you just think that Bitcoin is another asset, then all you think of is the fiat returns. All you think of is how much money you can make from the asset and maybe what the risks are of the asset. You can't think of where this company could go in the future. In this category, there are some really, really smart people. So for example, you have accounts like Mark Meldrum, 196,000 subscribers. He understands how money works. He understands how the legacy financial system works, but he doesn't understand how Bitcoin works. He doesn't get it. He said that MicroStrategy is basically a pyramid scheme. In the last couple of days, he made this video. So 3 days ago, he made this video, Cryptocurrency Fallacies Part 1. There are some things on here that make a lot of sense, but he's making some mistakes here that show you that he doesn't understand the value proposition of Bitcoin. So of course, he doesn't see where MicroStrategy can go. If you can't see that the world will be on a Bitcoin standard in the future, then of course you're going to think that MicroStrategy is a Ponzi scheme, a pyramid scheme, a scam, whatever names you want to give it. Of course, you're going to claim that MicroStrategy investors are idiots. You're going to claim that the people buying these shares, the people buying this stock, have no idea what they're doing. If you don't understand what Bitcoin is, MicroStrategy is a layer on top of Bitcoin. It's using leverage to buy Bitcoin. It's accumulating as much capital as it can, and no other company will ever catch up to what MicroStrategy is doing. We saw Microsoft, for example. Their shareholders rejected Bitcoin. They rejected having Bitcoin on their treasury because most of their investors are old men. I believe the average age was 50 years old. It takes a lot of time to study and understand Bitcoin. So at that age, if you're 50 years old, you're probably not going to have the time to put in to understand Bitcoin at the level that a lot of the people who are buying MicroStrategy will. MicroStrategy CEO, of course, he's a unicorn. He's somebody who's figured this out. He figured it out earlier than all of Wall Street. Now he's trying to push his strategy to Wall Street. He's going to keep accumulating Bitcoin. He's going to keep buying Bitcoin. He's going to keep bringing the floor price of MicroStrategy's shares up. And I'll explain what that means. But he's going to keep working for the shareholders, and he's going to keep adding value. These people who are saying that MicroStrategy is a pyramid scheme, the people who don't understand what cryptocurrencies are, they don't understand what Bitcoin is, of course they're going to be bearish on MicroStrategy. Of course they're going to tell you that MicroStrategy is a pyramid scheme. Can you imagine what the world could look like if MicroStrategy is the biggest bank in the entire world? If every single company in the world runs its payroll through MicroStrategy, if every company interacts with wallets that have liquidity provided by MicroStrategy, what is the value of that? How would that change the world? How would that change MicroStrategy's value? What would happen if Bitcoin's value goes up to $100 million and MicroStrategy has 2% of the total supply? Where will MicroStrategy stand in comparison to every other bank, every other financial institution, every other company in the world? Because MicroStrategy has this asset that nobody can create more of. There's nothing else in the world like that. Nothing else in the world works the way that Bitcoin works. And of course, these people don't understand it. Watch this video. I'll link it in the description. There's a lot of points that he makes that are great, but he doesn't understand what Bitcoin is. He doesn't understand the point of Bitcoin. He doesn't understand where it's going. I'm not going to do a full review in this video. Maybe I'll do that later. If you guys are interested, just leave a comment below. But the point here is that there's a lot of people who are going to tell you that MicroStrategy is a pyramid scheme. What would the value of MicroStrategy be if the world starts using Bitcoin daily? If everybody's using Bitcoin for every single transaction that they have, MicroStrategy can now build a second, third, or fourth layer on top of the base layer of Bitcoin. And they're the ones who every company in the world runs their payroll through. What is that worth? What is every single financial institution that exists today? What is all of their market cap worth? What value are they of the total economy? I was looking at some numbers. The financial industry is worth about $25 trillion. So could MicroStrategy go to $25 trillion? I don't know. I'm not saying that they could do this. I'm not saying that this is where the world is going. I don't know. Nobody really knows. But if MicroStrategy has enough of a head start, is that where their stock price could be heading? I don't know if that's going to happen. I can't tell you. But I think that based on their current assets, they have the hardest asset in the world, the best collateral. They have so much of this money that is it's hard to describe in one video, but this money can't be changed. It can't be corrupted. Nobody can steal it from you. Nobody can take it away from you. They have this money. They have so much of this money. They have 425,000 Bitcoin, something along those lines. 425,000 Bitcoin. Do you think that a company that has this much Bitcoin should only be worth 3 times the amount of Bitcoin that they have? I think that if you think 3 times is high, I don't think you understand where Bitcoin is going. I don't think you understand where the where the value of MicroStrategy could go because of this. I don't think you can see where everything that MicroStrategy is doing can go. I think Bitcoin is going to create a brand new economy, and MicroStrategy is going to be the base layer of it. Just like how banks are the base layer of today's economy. So we have Wells Fargo, we have JP Morgan, we have all these banks. MicroStrategy could be the base layer. They could be building the base layer. What is that worth? What value could all of this add to the US economy? So all of those things are things that you have to think about. You have to think about everything about how the company's value is based on the future value, not the current value, the future value. And what I mean by the floor price of MicroStrategy's stock is this right here. So this is the BTC value per basic share. BTC value per diluted share is also important. This is based on the shares that could be added to the float in the future. But let's say this number here. Over time, this is going up. It's at 155.65 in this video. I think 6 months to 8 months from now, this will be a lot higher. This could be $300, $400, $500 because the price of Bitcoin will have gone up. MicroStrategy will continue to add more Bitcoin. The floor price of their shares will continue to increase. I think this is hard to really conceptualize if you don't understand how Bitcoin works. If you think that Bitcoin shouldn't be at $100,000, of course you're going to think that MicroStrategy is pretty much worthless. You're not going to see where it's going. You're going to think it's a pyramid scheme. And there are other CFA charter holders, who think this way. So let me show you a post here. We can see this post here. It's a CFA charter holder. His name is Michael Leibowitz. He says, MicroStrategy MSTR is preying on investors. They're pumping up optimism on Bitcoin to drive higher volatility to their stock. Doing so allows them to raise funds and add to their Bitcoin holdings. Its convertible funding strategy is legal, but the risks to its shareholders and bondholders are much more significant than many of the investors appreciate. I did a little bit more digging on who Michael Leibowitz is, and he's been wrong about Bitcoin since 2017. I don't know if he's changed his views more recently. He wrote a report just explaining his thoughts on this. And even from this report, you can see that they can't see where MicroStrategy could be going in the future. They can't see the fact that maybe it's going to be a Bitcoin bank. It could create something in the Bitcoin economy. They don't see it. Most people just don't get it yet. And that's why they think that MicroStrategy is a pyramid scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's taking advantage of its investors. They can't see where this can go. Near the end here, there's a point where it says cheaper approaches to owning Bitcoin. Tom Lee is correct in that investors limited solely to fixed income instruments now have a way to gain exposure to Bitcoin. However, there are much better options for anyone else wanting to own Bitcoin. MicroStrategy isn't just a way for you to own Bitcoin. You're owning the equity in a company. You're just getting exposure to what they do in the future. You're getting exposure to their future activities. You're taking a share of their profits, you're taking a share of their losses. That's what you're doing as an equity holder. You're not trying to get exposure to Bitcoin. You're not trying to own Bitcoin. If I wanted to own Bitcoin, I could just own the ETFs with a lot less risk because the ETFs aren't using leverage. My goal here is to buy a company that's building on Bitcoin. That's what MicroStrategy is doing. MicroStrategy is building on Bitcoin. On the other hand, a company like Fidelity or BlackRock, they're not building on Bitcoin. They're using Bitcoin to build on fiat. That's the difference here. And we can see in this article here, MicroStrategy aims for $1 trillion valuation as a Bitcoin bank. MicroStrategy, led by founder and executive chairman Michael Saylor, is positioning itself to become a leading player in the Bitcoin banking sector. So trying to say that MicroStrategy's shares should be selling at 1 times NAV, if we go back to the tracker, trying to say that this number should be back to 1 times is like saying that a bank should be trading at the value of the cash that they hold. And I don't think that makes any sense. I really don't think that makes any sense. Because if the bank's business is in lending money out to other people and then earning cash flows, and that's similar to what MicroStrategy is doing, shouldn't you calculate MicroStrategy's value based on its future projections of how it'll become a Bitcoin bank, what it'll do to get to that point?